as be my guest. I think join me for a meal sounds a little bit better only if there were people joining me for a meal. So I would like to retitle this as be my guest. So the meal today is quite simple. Grass-fed ground beef, a mixture of peppers, yellow and red. You have mang dal and red lentils with asparagus, with a side of goat cheese. So this goat cheese has dill. So the purpose of this meal is it's a high protein meal together with adequate phytonutrients and from the vegetables, but at the same time vegetables tend to build up a lot of oxalates, which are actually very harsh on your kidney. You want to kind of be able to cleanse it or at least get rid of it via hydration, or you're gonna have to do it with some dairy products as well. So the purpose of this meal is very well planned. Obviously, folks would prefer your higher fatty foods in the morning, and that's very natural because as we wake, you tend to want to have a breakfast. You want to have a breakfast in the morning, and that breakfast usually constitutes to possibly high processed foods, anything that's convenient, and at the same time you want to have that feeling of satiation. So this meal was cooked with ghee. You could obviously change it and switch it up to perhaps maybe olive oil or avocado oil, that's fine. I've kind of moved towards sweet almond oil, which has a higher smoke point than olive oil, but it's also good for the skin, so it's quite beneficial. So kind of that's the roundup. This is just simple water. I try to hydrate myself perhaps 1 hour before my meal, and after a workout, I do not immediately eat. I wait about maybe 30 minutes to about half an hour, prep the meal, and then after that, I'm ready to go. Right now, the idea of me doing this is to help people identify what are holistically healthy foods, because the idea of convenience foods has already been long indoctrinated in society. So wherever you go, you think about it, what's convenient? So let's say we talk about from an Asian context, right? If I'm someone who is rushing off to work, wherever near the mass rapid transit stations, or MRT we call it, you would call it a subway or subway station, you have these convenience stores. Try to identify what are the breakfasts or the foods that are available like. You notice they're fast, they are able to be done with a microwave, which is already a big red flag, right? And they are usually pre-packaged. So it doesn't matter. Obviously, there's a way of freshly bringing these produce together and then assembling it as conveniently and as quickly as possible. So that's the whole idea, right? And the margins should be profitable enough so that they can open shop there. So think about it this way. If these ingredients are not or have a high shelf life, or at least a decently high shelf life, and you have good volume, okay, you will have the ability to perhaps have a fresher ingredients in that meal. Now, if you are eating something like McDonald's, for example, or any kind of fast food chain, most of the time the foods, right, from the protein to the bun, all these things actually have a good amount of shelf life. They are never made fresh. They are made for mass consumption and speed. But the whole production line of till it gets to you needs to be as quick as possible. Now, the concept of fast foods transitions and changes a little bit in the Singapore context. Now we have something called the economic foods. Economic foods are very cheap. We are talking about less than $5, but everything is done at high heat. everything is done at the cheapest, most cost-effective oils, which are vegetable oils. Vegetable oils are a blend oil. They have the ability to cook at high heats, but they are not of high quality. So when you look at vegetable oil, right, and you kind of narrow it down, it has very high omega-6 and very little omega-3 ratios, right? When you have very high omega-6, that also causes the body to build up in terms of potential inflammation and fats that you do not want and could have the potential of getting rid of. So when you think about it, right, from an Asian context, you look at it as this is fast, it's convenient, it's cost effective because it's around $5. I definitely can afford it. And I need to wolf it down and get to work. So most of the time, this is from personal experience. The carbohydrate is usually some form of noodle, right? It's a thin noodle or a thicker noodle. It's either in black sauce or it has black sauce, or it's without, and it's a process. It's already a processed food in itself. It's not a natural thing. A noodle is obviously man-made. It's never freshly made. At the same time, you're going to have sodium, you're going to have the vegetable oil I mentioned, and you're going to have the dark soy sauce to kind of sweeten it up. Okay, that already is pretty tasty on its own. Then everyone else adds a fried egg, right? You add also potentially some form of meat. It's usually a spam. You guys are familiar, we call it luncheon meat, you may call it spam. That's also deep fried, another piece as well. Then you have chicken wings, which are deep fried as well. The whole meal in itself could easily, right, be in excess of 500 calories and above. Although yes, you can say that, oh, there's protein in there. You could add some vegetables, which is like oily, also fried in the same kind of oil. And that will all be pre-prepared for you to select. They prepare all this very early in the morning. Now, although there's nothing right, neither there's nothing wrong, because like I said, everybody has a budget, everybody has a requirement for feeling full, and that serves its purpose. But is it healthy? No. Clearly, there can be no realm that if you consume that on a regular basis, and even with consistent exercise, could you effectively remove, right, whatever that's building up in there over time. Now, this is something that is a cause for concern. A lot of people don't realize this. So I just wanted to highlight that wherever you are in the world, you have probably something similar. Whether you're in Europe, whether you're in the UK, you're in the US, it's pretty similar. And all these kind of cheap foods, convenient foods, are very rarely awesome. Now I know in London you have Pret a Manger. I hope I didn't mince that up. Pret a Manger is also like, you know, a sandwich place, you know, have juices and all that. Try to identify how the juices are made. At the same time, when you look at the freshness, I've had Pret a Manger before, and I feel that it's pretty okay, but I don't like the bread. The white bread is the part where is the high carbohydrate, and it's a highly processed carbohydrate, right? It's a very fast digesting, it's a fast digesting carbohydrate. But the inside is pretty okay. I've seen some with rocket, some with crayfish. Now, the only thing that you don't know is what kind of oils they use. Now, the killer in most foods are the oil, because you try to understand that if I can give you all premium stuff, I need to save on something to push up my profit margin. The oil is the one that is the killer. I spend a lot of money on oils so that my foods can be prepped. And this is not difficult to prep, guys. It is so simple. It's just a one pan kind of dish. But the oil and the amount of sodium, it's up to you. I'm not someone who uses MSG. I'm not a big fan of it, but it doesn't matter. If you're someone who enjoys MSG, it's not that big a deal. It's just to enhance. It's a taste enhancer. But end of the day, it functions much like salt because it is monosodium glutamate, right? So at the end of the day, it's still a salt. As long as your body is active enough and you are hydrating yourself enough to purge the sodium, and your kidney is functioning well, that it will help to get rid of through your skin and through the daily activity, sodium should not be a cause for concern. It's a cause for concern when you live a sedentary life. In fact, when you live a sedentary life, most things are a cause for concern. Now, anyway, 10 minutes is up. Enough of the nutrition aspect. Let's talk about OpenAI. Now, to me, OpenAI, that whole drama was a mixture of maybe perhaps. Now, this is just my personal opinion. Don't take my word for it, because a lot of it, when you're looking at it, right, where suddenly Microsoft is kind of wanting to onboard Sam Altman and potentially Greg Brockman, right? And also a large part of the staff, 700, almost close to 750 staff have signed to want to join Microsoft, because they feel that, this move of having a non-profit board, that part I'm not very sure how that works. How does a non-profit board actually vote out and sack the key person, the key CEO? Now, obviously, from a very simplistic standpoint, Sam doesn't own enough of the company to have himself voted out, right? Perhaps through the business model, he was selling off his shares for, cash for equity or whatever, and at the end of the day, he has a kind of smaller stake. Hence, the board had the control and the ability to knock him out. And it kind of also boiled down. There's this Angelo guy, I think there's Michael D'Angelo. I might be getting the name wrong, but yes, there might be some potential jealousy, because there are competing subcategories of businesses within OpenAI that he felt was, and of course Sam is probably the more well likable individual, and then from then, this happens. Now, humans at the end of the day still control a company, and from Microsoft's standpoint, I feel that Microsoft at the end of the day could only kind of try to salvage the situation. Microsoft shares did tank the moment this happened, but there is also that losing less is not about anyone winning overall, because you're causing a lot of instability within the OpenAI company, right? Because if I was a developer and I'm trying to build something, right? Let's say I want to build something on OpenAI. I'm like, what is going on, at this point of time? And with this whole debacle, I'm not having a safe place that I can call home. I just want to do my thing. I want to build stuff. I don't want to have to handle this drama. And when this happened, right, you're going to see a large part of the staff move away from OpenAI, right? Because they don't want to have a boat that is like having holes in it and not able to build effectively and not build the platform properly. So what happens then? So I feel that OpenAI as a platform, no matter what, if you are able to have a ecosystem much like blockchain, right, where it's as decentralized as possible, although it may not be as fast in terms of transactions and stuff like that, and maybe perhaps pulling data is always very cost intensive, because you're running with validator nodes, you're running on a proof of stake consensus mechanism, then everything runs a little bit slower, right? Getting stuff approved, like getting a protocol approved, you need to do voting, versus a corporate company where, okay, we put this proposal up, we let a few members of the board decide, okay, everything gets pushed through. Maybe got 5 or 10 people on the board. It's much more straightforward versus a blockchain protocol. But when you think about, a consensus mechanism on a blockchain. But when you think about it, right, after what just happened, there are the pros and cons of having a decentralized platform. So when I spoke of a decentralized AI platform, right, it actually goes across the board, where decentralization helps. Like, now people can just save, as long as you have built a stable blockchain platform and you are able to kind of continuously build, you're able to get the API, you're building the tools, you're having the SDK for the developers to build stuff on. I think it kind of helps alleviate such a situation from happening. It will not, in fact, it might not even happen, right? Because it's already based on code. however people decide is based on the voting, and whoever has a stake, who are the stakeholders, right? And who are able to kind of give that control back and forth depending on how people are voting. So this is very important, at least to me. And you notice that most founders of a blockchain platform, right, they tend to not hold on to the company that much. They are more willing to allow the community or the developers to start building on it. And the most important is that it's safe and secure, and there's a fair way of getting and putting through things, right? Getting your ideas across. Because you don't want to be wasting your time, right? In a on a platform only to have your ideas completely like firstly not heard, that's one. Two, after building and spending time, there's not enough funding, there's not enough development to push your idea across into fruition. I think that's something that's very important for me. So when I think about it, it's like just living in a safe country, right? A country may be decided and kind of you decide on who are going to be the politicians for the country. Hence, there's always voting every 4 years, every certain amount of terms, right? And whoever are the politicians will push through whatever policies that are good for the people who have voted. So it's very much similar, right? And you want a country that is stable, right? You have good healthcare, you have affordable housing, you have affordable food. It's kind of and utilities, so on and so forth. Whatever are the main things that allow us as a citizen to live in that country. Okay, so you think about it from a blockchain standpoint, or even running a company, right? Whether you are someone building with that company, working with that company, or you run that company, you have to have that same mindset of how the environment should function. This is why the whole OpenAI thing was a bit shocking to me, but end of the day, it boils down to a few things, right? Profit, human characteristics, human jealousy, and obviously, it's just messy. It's like basically you couldn't come to a consensus that was favorable. You had to somehow kick Sam Altman out. Now, whether or not, because when I looked at the reason, I was like, what does this mean? That he was giving a very candid answer. I was like, what does that even mean? It's not like, it's very vague. So it just goes to show that when there's no maturity in running a running a company, same thing. If there's no maturity in running a country as well, for example, there's a lot of corruption within a country. That also causes a lot of instability. And the people who know how to work with a corrupted system will benefit. Whereas people who are very upright, trustworthy and true will not benefit because they do not think that way. They do not want to function that way because it affects their moral compass. So this is kind of like why I feel that these are the things that are important when you're running or being part of a blockchain community, or at least a crypto company, right? Because it's all based on code. And yes, there are ways to communicate with the platform through Discord or through maybe a Telegram group. But at the end of the day, the voting is based on how much stake you have, right? The voting and proposals can be put up, but the stake that you have allows you to vote. So it's kind of fair in that sense. And then if obviously that can be manipulated, right? If you're well to do enough, you can still have, a large bunch of your cronies, right? Or even yourself, right? Owning quite a large part of the tokens. That means that's the part where it gets a little bit shady, because you could also compromise that aspect. This is something that I feel will only happen if the company had the wrong intent from the very beginning. That means they allowed a large part of their token circulation or their token issuance to be in the hands of their own cronies, right? When I say cronies, because they don't have the right intent. But if you allow a very fair way of people to own the tokens, right, then that's fine. I think that becomes very, very fair. So when I think about all this that's happening, I always assess a company from my own personal investing mandate, right? I want to see how the company functions and runs, and if they are having a very healthy environment. Now, obviously, in front of the lens, everybody doesn't show their true self, and obviously, through time, a lot of things become more apparent and revolution, right? Because it will be revealed only when a company is extremely profitable, and clearly OpenAI is very profitable at this point in time. But when you listen to a lot of other AI podcasts, there are actually a lot of Web3 companies and AI companies that are also up and coming, that have reasonably good models as well. But of course, at this point of time, OpenAI has the backing and funding. This part is the part where it gets is quite understood that the majority of the core OpenAI companies are being run by the biggest organizations. It's the same thing where the largest, the top companies, right, in the stock market, which I think only 50 companies, right now are 25 companies, and they own the majority of the market cap. What does that tell you? That a lot of things are starting to become more and more and more centralized by these large entities. And it's something that perhaps we can't really control, because they are always growing and getting larger and larger and larger. They know how to play the game. So it's something that you can't really avoid. It's just that it's just something to be mindful of and to think of. So that's kind of like my thoughts. I feel that there will be an opportunity for us, as the smaller investors, to still come in and be part of this ecosystem. But what I've realized is that at this point of time, right, a lot of investments are only available for sophisticated investors or institutional investors. Okay? And it's kind of preventing the retail investors from really stepping in, even though they have the potential knowledge or they've done enough research. And that's the part that's a bit painful. You still have to kind of validate your it's not just about money. You also kind of have to reach a certain status in order to still be able to have access. And that is why I feel that the dApps, the DEXs still provide that access. It's just that I hope that the DEXs are continuously improving their security, especially when there's always a lot of breach hacks. Hopefully that the security and the updates are always coming to help prevent the breach hacks from happening. That's the only thing I have as a concern, because you are not protected when you use a decentralized exchange. You're only protected in a way if you use perhaps a centralized exchange that has a emergency fund. Now, centralized exchanges don't have to cover you either, because they are not backed by the central governments. They're not backed by a central bank. For example, if a bank, right, especially a national bank, right, has a bank run, or at least there was some kind of exploit that happened within the bank, the central government can at least, based on the case, step in and refund the customers of that loss, provided it was not the customer's fault. It was perhaps an attack on the bank's security, an attack on the bank's infrastructure. But if it happens to you, right, on your own accord, obviously the banks don't cover. That's pretty given. So when you think of it, there's still that extra layer, that safety net. Whereas crypto, there's no such thing. So always be very mindful that you're stepping into a space that is still very, very new. It's still very innovative. Let's just put it this way. It's consistently evolving. And so with that being said, I want to wrap up because it's a weekend. I think everybody would be out partying or whatever. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching, and thank you for being on Be My Guest. Thanks, guys.